horizon. A little early, it's a bit surprising. Business moves, now we enterprising. Switch it up, now we improvising. Go to get in the winter.
All right, Miami Sports Music's #1 Miami fan morning show. Clock Blockers right here on the Miami Sports Music Podcast Network. We are going to talk some Miami Heat basketball. Super excited. Great series going on. Maybe the best player in the game right now currently in Jimmy Butler. But who should we have on to talk about it? We got to get the Locked On family to talk about it. So without further ado, let me bring on for the first time for Clock Blockers here from Locked On Heat, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wes Goldberg. What's up, Wes?
What's up, guys? How we going?
Pretty good, man.
Good morning, Wes. How are you?
I'm good.
I like the hat. Man. Definitely like the hat.
Yeah, the old Miami Vice, man. That's the way to go.
Hey, I know, man. Hey, #1, thank you for coming on. I've been a big fan of you watching Locked On Heat for a while. Before we get into it, just tell us a little bit about yourself to the listeners who might not know you, and for the ones that do, and tell us a little bit about Locked On Heat.
Sure. I've been covering the NBA for about 10 years now. I covered the Golden State Warriors when I lived in San Francisco. I covered the Heat before that, and now I'm back in Miami covering the Heat again. I'm back on the beat for 2 years now. And Locked On Heat, man, it's a daily Miami Heat show. If you're a Miami Heat fan, it's the best place to go for 30 minutes of Heat content every single morning. Perfect for your morning commute, your run, maybe a little jog on the treadmill, whatever it's going to be. And I think we do the best. I think we do a great job. So it's equal parts analysis, information. Me and my co-host David Ramil grew up Heat fans, so we come from it through that lens too. And it's just a great way to experience being a Miami Heat fan. So that's what we got going on.
I love it, Wes. And for those of you, go listen to Locked On Heat after Clock Blockers, the #1 Miami fan morning show. But yes, big fan of what you're doing in the Locked On family over there. All right, let's get into it, man. The Miami Heat limped into the playoffs, man. They had to play in the play-in series. They limped into that, and then they had to face the #1 seed in the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's just briefly talk about that. The play-in series and beating the #1 team in all of basketball in the Milwaukee Bucks. Tell me a little bit about that, your thoughts and views.
Surprising, and it was unfortunate that Giannis got hurt in game 1. I think everybody was looking forward to seeing that series, and obviously the Heat were able to take advantage of that. But I think the Heat were just the better team. I don't think that that's something you could chalk up to Giannis getting hurt. The Bucks did not execute. The Heat were more physical. They made their shots in a way that the Milwaukee Bucks did not. And as we know, so often in today's NBA, it just sort of comes down to that. We can overanalyze things all we want, but the Heat shot like 70% in that series. So that you're going to win a lot of games that way.
Yep.
And Wes, speaking of overanalyzing, what do you make of, the dreadful 3-point shooting this team exhibited through the regular season and then coming out in the playoffs and that Bucks series and doing what they did?
Dude, I have no idea. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think it's almost a mental thing where you hear players talk about this all the time. And the Heat talked about it going into these playoffs. Yeah, it's been a frustrating year, but now our record is 0-0, and throw all the old stats out the window. They don't matter anymore. And I always that's just like weird, like coach speak, locker room speak. It doesn't really mean anything. But when you also think about 3-point shooting, so much of it is mental, right? Like you have to practice your form and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of it is just mental. A lot of it can be mental, especially if you're going through a slump. And it just felt like that slump just had this like cascading effect across the Heat's roster all season long, and nobody could really get out of it. And I think there might be something too. Okay, we got to have this play-in tournament. We're in the playoffs. We're 0-0. Nothing matters. Brand new season. And just when you think about the mentality of a basketball player, maybe that little refresh that kind of hit the reset button, I think that was helpful. I think it was helpful. And so if you come out in game 1 against the Milwaukee Bucks and you just shoot the lights out, and I think everybody's sort of looking around after like, hey, are we good at this again all of a sudden? All right, awesome. Let's go. And almost the opposite of that shooting slump where it can be contagious. The same thing could be said for hot shooting, right? The Warriors have experienced this for years, right? You go play with Steph Curry, all of a sudden you're a great 3-point shooter because you're getting a lot of open shots.
Unless your name is Jordan Poole.
That's a whole other thing, dude. That was amazing. Yeah, I think now everybody just has this confidence, right? And it's incredible how that works, even in the face of injuries to Tyler Hero, Victor Oladipo, now Jimmy Butler missing a game. Like they're still so they didn't shoot great in game 2 against the Knicks, but unlike in the regular season where they would come out and shoot poorly and you'd be like, all right, here we go. It's just going to be like a month of shooting 26% from 3-point range. I don't think that Heat fans and the Heat themselves are feeling like that's going to be the case going into Game 3.
I want to briefly touch on the injury bug, but before I do, I just want to stay on this 3-point conversation because last night I'm watching the Sixers Celtics game.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there talking with my wife, and we've watched pretty much every series with the exception of Denver or Phoenix games. We just have not watched them, unfortunately. But I've been watching almost every other game in the NBA. And the number one thing we always discuss, my wife and I, is why do teams feel the need to shoot threes? Because I look at it and I look at Golden State. Golden State has the ugliest 3-point shots I have ever seen, but they go in. And every team seems to feel like when they're down or, and they could be down by 8 points with 6 minutes left. We need to go for 3. We need to go for 3. It infuriates me, Wes, that more teams in the NBA don't drive it to the hole more. Why is the NBA fixated on shooting threes over going to the hole more?
I don't know that they're fixated on shooting threes over getting to the basket. They are fixated on shooting threes more than taking 2-pointers from that mid-range area. That is just simple math, right? Like if you shoot, let's say 50% from mid-range, right? Which would be like prime Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant numbers. You're still posting an offensive rating of 100. You're scoring 100 points per 100 possessions. That would be easily the worst offense in the NBA. Even if all of your players were Michael Jordan from mid-range, you would literally have the worst offense in the NBA. That's just analytics, right? And so you want to get to the basket because a good rate at the basket is like 60 to 70%, depending if you're a guard or a big man. And now all of a sudden you're multiplying that. If everybody on your roster is shooting 60% on the basket, that's an offensive rating of 120. Okay. And so that would be the best offense in NBA history. And then from 3-point range, now the math is a little bit different because instead of multiplying by 2, you're multiplying by 3. Okay. And so now you're getting back to like if you're shooting 30% from 3-point range now, or I'm sorry, 40% from 3-point range. Now you will also have the best offense in NBA history. So I think it's just getting to those better spots. The thing is, it's way easier to shoot threes than to get to the basket. There are a lot of players who can't get to the rim for a lot of reasons. Defenses, number one, have identified that players would prefer to get to the basket. And so now every defense, basically 80% of NBA defenses play drop coverage where they have somebody like Brook Lopez or Jaren Jackson Jr. or somebody like that just hanging out by the rim. It's like, good luck getting here, man. And so now if you're an opposing player, like, well, they've got this 7-foot defensive monster right in front of their basket. So now I got to just shoot threes in order to get the math to work, right? And so it's not to say that you don't want to take the mid-range shots. I think you want to put some of those in there in your offense, obviously, and those become even more important in crunch time, in like the last 5 minutes where you kind of start throwing those stats out the window and you just got to get buckets. But for the big part of the games, like these NBA teams are realizing we've probably got to take 43s a game just to be competitive offensively. And that's why the Heat have even come out and said, we need to take 43s a game, despite having really good mid-range players like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and obviously Jimmy Butler. So that's just the math. And I think when you kind of look in the aggregate of a season or a series, it is. And it makes sense because if you don't do it that way, your offense can kind of get in the mud
like that. I never looked at it like that.
But it's a good segue in why the Heat were so successful against Boston, not just the 3-point shooting, but Jimmy Butler specifically, because as you say, he's one of the best dribble drive guys and best mid-range guys, but he added a 3-point shot in that series that now you have to defend, right? So how important is that moving forward for the Heat?
Jimmy's 3-point shot. I don't know. I don't know why he doesn't do it in the regular season. It's a decent look. He's really flat-footed. It's not even a jump shot. He just kind of stands and shoots.
He does.
It's a stand shot. It's not a jump.
I was talking about that the other night. I was like, this is so weird.
It's so strange, and he's got the slowest friggin' release, and it's the weirdest thing. But teams leave it open. So I don't know. I would like him to shoot. And I even remember going into this season with talking with my co-host on Locked On Heat, like, what if Jimmy just took 3 a game? Just 3 3-pointers. Just 3 open ones. Like, that's it. He doesn't have to be coming up. But then in the playoffs, he's now, like, pulling up in transition and all that stuff. Like, I think those are good looks for him. I think he's actually – I like his form better when he's bringing the ball up himself and pulling up versus, like, catching and shooting off of somebody else's dribble drive. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why he waits until the playoffs. I wonder if it's a little bit of baiting the other teams. I also think part of Miami's offense asks him to be the guy that gets into the lane and then kick out to Max Strus and Gabe Vincent and Duncan Robinson. And I think he just really puts it on himself to sort of set the table in that way. And in the playoffs, he's like, all right, enough setting the table. I'm taking over. I'm eating the steak. I'm doing all of this. Let's go.
Well, and now defenses have to worry about closing out on Jimmy, right? Because now he's a threat to pull up, as you said, if he's bringing the ball up. But it also allows him now, because he's got such a quick first step, to get to the hole and dish to Bam or kick it out.
Exactly.
Which is a major reason why I think they beat Milwaukee.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Milwaukee never really started going over on those screens. They basically just let Jimmy shoot them. And there was
him shoot without any really. They didn't contest it at all.
No, and I think that's going to be the game plan for most teams. I think that if they're, because the best, look, great players, you're not going to take everything away. You're just trying to take one thing away. You're trying to take something away. And if what you're going to try to take away from Jimmy Butler is his three-point shooting, that's stupid because he's way better at everything else than the three-point shooting, right? And so you're going to go under on all those screens. You're going to let him shoot because the worst thing you want to do is close out, like you said, and have him blow right by you, or just hang back and just let him drive, or just let him shoot it. And so I haven't seen teams aggressively close out on that Jimmy three-pointer yet, and I don't blame them. But if he's making them, man, he's making them. And like I said, like he wants to take that shot in crunch time. We saw that in Game 7 last year. In that instance, you kind of have to contest it. And I'd be interested to see what happens. Like, it kind of feels like we've maybe already seen him set it up almost like a play action in the NFL, right? Where you run, and then you're going to throw it over the top. Like, if there's another game that's like a 2 or a 3-point game, and Jimmy Butler is coming down that left side where he wants, or the right side where he wants to take that shot, like he did in Game 7, like he did against the Milwaukee Bucks and made it. Do teams know that now, that he's going to take that and aggressively close out, and then he just blows right by him and gets to the rack if it's like a 2-point game to tie it? I kind of feel like we might have like had the table set for something like that. It'll just be interesting to see if we ever get a situation like
I
that.
believe that we will, and I definitely believe that we will, especially with the teams that we're planning out.
If that happens, clip this and then like just put it out there on Twitter. Like, they'll be like, "Wow, this guy is a genius."
Well, that's kind of why I asked the question, because you can see it happening.
Is a genius and Nostradamus. There we go. Let's go.
You can see it happening now because, in the big picture of things, the offensive options for this team moving forward as competition gets stiffer is really limited for the Heat, with Hero and Oladipo going down. And really, let's talk about this next. Where's Bam been?
Bam's been on defense. That's where he's been, man. Like, he's just been – his defense in these playoffs have been unbelievable. And I know that people want more from him in terms of scoring. His first 2 games against the Milwaukee Bucks were actually pretty good, and people kind of forget that. But it's been since then that he's been kind of up and down, and then having only 10 shots in a game without Jimmy Butler against the Knicks in Game 2. No, he needs to do more than that, right? You need to do more of that, and he owned up to it after the game. But you'd like to see – it's such a hard balance because he's also – sort of the fulcrum of the offense, right? The reason the ball gets from one side of the court to the other in Miami's offense is because Bam Adebayo's in the middle facilitating that, right? Getting it and swinging it from one side to the other. So there's part of the job where it's like, okay, I need to facilitate on offense, but in the fourth quarter, you would have liked them to see, like, just shoot more. Like, it's the Chris Paul, LeBron James, Isaiah Thomas formula. Let me set up my teammates for 3 quarters, and then I take over in the fourth quarter. He took 1 shot in the fourth quarter in Game 2. He needs to be better than that. And I just think that that's part of the evolution for him right now, and he's going through it, and it's not a natural thing. It's very, very hard to find and strike that balance of when do I get aggressive and maybe take what would be quote unquote a bad shot, but I'm gonna try to force the issue, versus what am I gonna taking what the defense is giving me. It's a hard balance. It's very, very hard. And I think he's sort of in the process of figuring it out.
All right, let me get into the Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo injuries and how they'll play a role moving forward. Because when those injuries occurred, I have to be honest, as a Heat fan, people were like, "Hey, I don't know," because as we all have seen over the last couple of years, Bam somehow disappears in the playoffs sometimes, most times, and it doesn't. But Jimmy Butler. There's a difference, as you said earlier, there's a difference between regular season Jimmy and playoff Jimmy. And playoff Jimmy just takes it to another level. So for some reason, it didn't look like it really affected them at all. Why is the struggle or the injuries of Victor Oladipo or Tyler Hero not hurt the Miami Heat as much as we might thought it would have, especially during, like the regular season?
The Victor Oladipo injury, I'll start with that one because it's easier. It was unfortunate. It sucks. Everybody likes Victor Oladipo. It was hard to watch. I don't think the Heat were ever going to miss him because he just wasn't having that big of an impact on the roster. He's sort of on the fringe of the rotation, kind of a plug and play. Like, okay, we need like an all hands like defensive team on there. Let's put that lineup out there. Let's put Vic in there. And then in terms of Tyler Hero, it's been all Gabe Vincent. Like he's sort of taken the Tyler Hero role on, right? He's coming off those screens from Bam Adebayo against the drop coverages of Milwaukee and New York, and he's finding those gaps in their defense. And he's like, all right, and he's just going to lift up and shoot, right? They just needed somebody to be more aggressive. And when Tyler Hero went down, and Gabe Vincent was really the only guy, Max Strus and Duncan Robinson, they can obviously shoot the ball, but they're not that big of threats off the bounce. Gabe Vincent is, right? And so he was always the guy that made sense as sort of the Tyler Hero replacement. He can't do what Tyler Hero does in terms of the volume and the efficiency. Tyler Hero, I think, is their best scorer, their best shooter. And Gabe Vincent's up there, but we've already started to see some of the drawbacks on that, right? Like there was only he had a great series against Milwaukee, a really good game 1 against the Knicks. His game 2 against the Knicks was okay. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't what they needed it to be either. They're going to miss Tyler Hero at some point. And I think we really did start to see that in game 2. But they didn't really miss him against Milwaukee because everybody was shooting so well. When those numbers start to come back down to earth, like we started to see a little bit, that's when you're going to really see them miss Tyler Hero. And I do wonder if this Heat team has a kind of a ceiling on this playoff run without Tyler Hero. That would be the thing that worries me because they need his scoring, right? Like even in the fourth quarter, if Tyler Hero's there and Jimmy Butler's not, like Tyler Hero could have taken the Heat home in that game 2, right?
There's
like
no
that's
doubt
kind of what
about
he's
it.
made for.
I definitely think Tyler Hero would have been perfectly fine, and the Heat would have been perfectly fine against the Knicks in game 2 without Butler.
Exactly. So we're starting to see them miss him now.
Well, let's get into the New York Knicks and Miami Heat rivalry. That is, it's really cool to be playing against them in the playoffs again.
Yeah.
And reviving this rivalry that is the Heat and the Knicks. Tell us a little bit about this series, what we plan to go down, because game 1, the Heat come in. They obviously take care of business, but they score the least amount of points that they've scored in the entire playoffs, but they still playoffs so far, but they still win. And then in game 2, Butler didn't play, right? But we all saw Butler's face at the end of game 2, and he looked like he's about to come in game 3, which is Saturday night, and be a man on the mission. Tell us a little bit about the Heat and Knicks matchup.
Yeah, so on one hand for that game, the game 1 was just a great Heat win. They shot pretty well. They got to their game. They took the Knicks out of their game. Jalen Brunson wasn't as effective as you probably want him to be. But if you're the Knicks, you're like, well, we didn't have Julius Randle. Then the Knicks get Julius Randle in game 2. And the Knicks get to their game plan. They're getting the 3-pointers that they want to get. Jalen Brunson is really effective. He busts Miami's zone that they had to go to without Jimmy Butler. And they out-rebounded the Miami Heat. They kept their turnovers low, and they did in game 1 too. And so if you're the Knicks, you're saying, wow, we got to our game. We executed our game plan. This is how the New York Knicks win games and how they won so many games in the regular season. But if you're a Heat fan, you say, well, we didn't have Jimmy Butler. So now it kind of feels like, okay, you had one game without one of your stars. The Heat had one game without their big star. And now we're going into game 3 with both teams relatively healthy. I know Jalen Brunson and Jimmy are dealing with ankles. Julius Randle looked fine in game 2. I'm not concerned about his health, but both teams relatively healthy for a game 3 in the playoffs in Miami. Series tied 1-1. It feels like these were just sort of warm-ups, and now this series is really going to start.
About to take off.
Thing's about to take off, and that's why. And I think that's what we saw Jimmy Butler nodding about. He's like, okay, here we go. Because if you're the Heat, like we just lost this game by 6, and we didn't have our best player
without Butler.
I don't know that I care so much about the
score.
score.
Against Scott Foster too. Don't forget that. They have to play against Scott Foster as well. All right, let's just throw that in there.
I don't know that the point differential is something that's like transferable from one game to the next. I think that if I'm the Heat, what I'm worried about is we can't let the Knicks get back into their game plan with or without Jimmy Butler, because they are capable of doing it with Jimmy Butler on the court. No doubt. That is a very good basketball team. And Tom Thibodeau is a very good coach. And Eric Spoelstra says this all the time. He's been saying it all playoffs. It's about who blinks first, right? That's what the playoffs are all about. The Heat blinked in game 2. They blinked. In the fourth quarter, they blinked, and then they woke up, and the Knicks had won the game. So the Heat need to be very conscientious of not letting the Knicks get to their game plan. You can't just rely on, okay, we only lost by 6 without Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler comes back, we're going to win game 3. Nah, that's not how the playoffs work. They got to be ready.
Cameron?
Yeah, no, let's talk about Coach Spo and the bench and how he's got this team prepared to play. I mean, D Rob has been nothing but trash all season. Then he comes in, he plays meaningful minutes, and Strus went down with an injury. D Rob comes back in. Caleb Martin, we can't talk enough about, and you've got undrafted Hightower playing meaningful minutes. What does that say about Spo and how he's got this team prepared to make this playoff run?
I've been saying this probably for half a decade now. Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, and I think a lot of coaching, it's X's and O's. I remember like Brad Stevens came in and he's like, "Wow, these sideline out of bounds plays, they're so cool." Is Brad Stevens the best coach in the NBA? I was like, I don't know that he's the best coach in the NBA. He might be the best at drawing up sideline out of bounds plays, but I don't know. I never thought he was the best. He was a great coach, but I never thought he was the best in the NBA because like 90%. It's like almost like an iceberg, right? Like most of coaching you just don't see. 90% of it, you just don't see it. The fan doesn't see it. Media doesn't see it. You can get a sense of it based on quotes and talking to people and listening to press conferences, but you don't see it. And so much of it is just it's like setting a culture for your business, for your company. And that's really what Eric Spoelstra, I think, is so good at. And why Udonis Haslem, by the way, has been so important playing that, being willing to be on the end of the bench for the last 6 years. It just sets the tone of, I'm going to say a sports cliche, and I even hate that I'm doing this, but like the next man up thing. I hate that cliche. It's stupid, but there are teams that embrace it, right? And I think the Heat are one of those teams that do. And they say, okay, take the ego, throw it out the window, play your role, do what we ask, and we promise that you'll get rewarded at the end of the day, right? Whether it's Hassan Whiteside, Tyler Johnson, Duncan Robinson, you're getting that contract. If you buy in, you're going to get that contract eventually. So I think there's a lot of parts to it. The Heat in general do a good job of scouting players who are going to fit that and bringing them in and have that mentality that they're looking for. And then Eric Spoelstra does a great job. There's a big part of Eric Spoelstra. His come up was not in. I know everybody talks about how he was like the video coordinator, and then but people forget that middle part. He didn't go from video coordinator to head coach. He was in charge of Miami's developmental program, and his first client was Dwayne Wade. All right, he's one of the best developmental coaches in the NBA. Okay, and he has been for a long time, and that's why he's the head coach.
He's a big reason why Dwayne Wade is a Hall of Famer.
And Dwayne Wade would be the first one to tell you that. And so, I think he's just really hands-on with these guys and developing them and sort of finding things in their game that fits what it is that Miami's trying to do, right? It's almost like Bill Belichickian in that way, where he just grabs some running back off the scrap heap, and now all of a sudden he's like a third down back and catching passes in a Super Bowl. And so there's a lot of things that go into it, and I know I'm going long-winded to answer your question, but it's complicated. If it were an easy thing, I think a lot of other coaches would do it. Spo's just got an innate ability to figure it out, connect with his players, and get them to buy in.
Towards the later part of the year, the Miami Heat ended up signing Kevin Love. What is Kevin Love going to be able to help with this team as they go further into the playoffs? Kevin Love having the experience of winning a championship with LeBron. What is Kevin Love going to be able to provide to this Miami Heat team?
So this is almost like the opposite of the question Cameron asked me earlier about like the 3-point, or maybe maybe it was you, Steven. I don't know who asked me the question about the.
We all asked great questions, Wes. It was
one of
us
so hard to keep track of. Yeah, it's no, the 2-pointers versus the 3-pointers conversation, right? Like that's so like because the regular season obviously is a larger sample than the playoffs. The playoffs to me come down to like the little gray areas, like the margins of the game, right? Where can you just like crank out like an extra 4 points? Like where can you just squeeze and wring out like another rebound or another assist or just like 6 points? And we saw that, right? We just saw that with the 3 straight outlet passes that Kevin Love had in game 1, where the Heat should not have scored on those plays probably, right? But he just manufactured out of thin air 6 straight points, right? Boom, outlet pass, boom, outlet pass, boom, outlet pass. And that's where the playoffs are won, to me, are those little margin things. That's the difference. And so when Kevin Love is having a hard time in the regular season because basically the 3-pointer is not working, he's kind of rendered useless, right? He's always been a solid rebounder, always will be a good rebounder because of his size and just natural knack for it. But if he's not shooting threes, you're not a stretch big anymore. And they needed him to be in the regular season. The Cavs needed him to be. They waived him. And then the Heat needed him to be, and he kind of was in and out of the starting lineup. And then the playoffs come around, and all of a sudden that stuff is still important, but those little things are even more important, and that's what he's provided them. It's the same thing it's why Kyle Lowry is all of a sudden a great player again for the Miami Heat coming off the bench. It's that stuff just matters. It's so much more elevated. Draymond Green says this. You got 82-game players, and you got 16-game players. I thought it's one of the best things that Draymond's ever said. I think it's so accurate. And Kevin Love's a 16-game player. Kyle Lowry's a 16-game player. Jimmy Butler is Michael Jordan in the playoffs, apparently. And that's why I think you've seen the Heat have a little bit more confidence in this postseason than in the regular season.
The Miami Heat went to the finals against the Lakers in the bubble. They were one game away from the finals last year against the Celtics, and they're obviously making a run right now. What is it about the Heat for the last 3 years or 3 or 4 years that they've been, at the top of the food chain when it comes to the NBA and dominating in the Eastern Conference?
Jimmy Butler. I mean, it just starts there. I think there's an idea out there that like the Heat don't have a guy capable of leading them to a championship, but they don't have like a 1A the way that the Warriors have Steph or the Lakers have LeBron or anything. And Jimmy Butler just every playoffs proves, I don't care about the regular season stats. I'll score 20 a game in the regular season. Don't matter. Playoffs roll around. I'm that guy. I'm just going to be that guy with a capital G again and get ready. And so I think that's the biggest difference is you look in the Eastern Conference in particular, and I think there's questions about the Boston Celtics and their makeup and Jason Tatum and where he kind of goes in those big moments. We've obviously have questions about Joel Embiid and James Harden. I think like before the Brooklyn Nets disintegrated, you kind of had questions about their guys. You never really have that question with Jimmy Butler. He's going to rise up to that moment. And there's not a lot of players that do that, right? There's not a whole lot of players that when the game's on the line, when it really matters, game 7 of a big series, you're going to get a great performance from that player. Maybe his team will win. Maybe his team won't win. But that player is going to step up and show up and have a great game. And Jimmy's just one of those guys. And I think that confidence just exudes from him and spills over to the rest of the roster. And you can hear it being in that locker room. Like you talk to the players and you're like, we got Jimmy, man. We got him. And he's going to lead us to where we got to go. I don't know if they're going to end up winning a championship with Jimmy Butler. It's stiff competition. Who knows what's going to ultimately happen? But I know no team wants to play the Miami Heat. And you just saw them beat the number 1 seed in the Milwaukee Bucks, and who was, a lot of people consider the best player in the NBA, and Giannis. And he was the best player in that series. And there's just not a lot of guys who can elevate their game that way.
I totally agree. All right, last question I have for you is as far as basketball is concerned. Game 3 Saturday night. By the way, I hate that there's 3 days between it because you go to the Lakers series, that's every other day, and there's a 3-day
Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon, I think it's 3:30. Yeah.
What should we expect game 3 Saturday night?
Well, the good thing about the big gap is that it gave Jimmy Butler plenty of time to get to heal up on that ankle. And if you're tuned into his Instagram, I guess that's what he's doing today. I expect Jimmy Butler to play. Everybody expects Jimmy Butler to play, so that's the number one thing. And I do think that we're gonna get a big Heat game. I think they're gonna be upset with what they saw in the film in that Knicks game because I rewatched it. And if you're the Miami Heat, I think there's a lot of things you got to clean up, rebounding, the defense against Jalen Brunson, all these things. And they're going to say, we were not good enough. We didn't come out with enough force. The Knicks just outplayed us in that game even without Jimmy Butler. So they're going to come out. They're going to play. I think they're going to play with intent. I think Jimmy Butler is going to be on one. And they're going to be very reluctant to give home court advantage back to the Knicks after they stole it in game 1 in this series. So I think that's what we're going to see.
All right, 2 more questions that have nothing to do with basketball. First question, it's May the 4th. Are you a Star Wars fan?
I am a fan. Seems strong. I'm entertained by Star Wars.
Okay, well, you're like Cameron. Come on, do better.
I know
Wes.
stuff. I know Tatooine. We just went to like in February. We did. Was it February? It doesn't matter. We went to Disney World and did like the little cantina thing, and I understood it. Why?
You get today's May the 4th. It's May the 4th be with you. It's a big day for Star Wars people.
Yeah. So my wife said that to me this morning. So I don't know. Like this is a Star Wars friendly household.
It's a thing, Wes. It's a thing. Just say it's a thing. That's it. Just go with it. You don't want the Star Wars people to get on you. It gets bad.
No, it's like the Beyonce people or the Taylor Swift people.
Beehive will come after you. Yeah. You don't want that.
Nothing but love for Beyonce, Taylor Swift, and Star Wars. Nothing but love.
And then my last thing is, where can the people find you and your amazing content? And by the way, we'd love to have you on, for the rest of this playoffs and keep bringing you on at least during weeklies so we can get, the best in touch depth analysis that you bring each and every time that you host Locked On Heat.
Yeah, so you can find me Locked On Heat. It's on YouTube, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Go check out allyoucanheat.com where we have written work. I just started there about a month ago, and I'm running that site, and so we're doing really good work. Proud of what we're building over there. So for written stuff, allyoucanheat.com. For the podcast, Locked On Heat, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, Miami Sports Music's #1 Miami fan morning show, Clock Blocker, Stephen Daniels, Cameron 954, and our guest today was Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat. I will be uploading this as a video after the show today on its own thing, so make sure you hit that like button and share the link, because all the Heat fans need to know that Wes Goldberg is the #1 place to get your Heat coverage, man. I appreciate it, Wes. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Have
Thanks
a good
for chopping it up, Wes.
Yep.
I know the whole city rising. A little early, it's a bit surprising. Business moves, now we enterprising. Switch it up, now we